Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the Sunday morning news and politics show for the Hoosier State without all that bad faith, both sides BS. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington this morning. We've had a very, very intense week in the news. We got a lot of stuff to cover. We are going to talk about the big story of the week, political violence, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That is our one big thing we'll talk about in the last third of the show. But first, we're going to go through the other news of the week, starting in Indiana and zooming out to talk about the international and national news. A lot of international news this week, too. First, a little bookkeeping, a little housekeeping. I do want to encourage you all to subscribe to Project Next. Are you watching on YouTube? Like and subscribe to this video. Be sure to hit that bell icon so you get notifications whenever we post new content. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at Project Next Movement on most of the social media platforms. As for me, old Scott here is at whosleft.us online, and that is my handle on many of the platforms as well. Thank you for bearing with the shameless promotion portion of our show. Let us welcome our panel this week. First, back for the first time since our very first episode, Kurt Mullett, Hoosier Blue 63 online, is with us today. Kurt,
how's it going?
Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, thanks for inviting me back, Scott.
Appreciate you being here on a very intense news week. So thank you for being here. Also, thank you to Christopher Maichin. Hello, Chris. Welcome back.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me back.
I'm glad you can be here with us this week. We've got some really uncomfortable stuff to talk about with political violence, and I really, really wanted to make sure we had a Republican, particularly a young Republican, here with us today to talk about these things. So we have a diverse view to talk about some difficult topics. But if we do get a little out of line, I've got Dee Owens here to whip us into shape. Dee, welcome back.
Thanks, Scott, for having me. But I may well dive in the mix and not be much of a go-between.
Oh, geez. Well, I hope we don't get to that point. So, before we start, I'm going to vow to try and keep this thing on the rails. Emotions are very high out there in the world this week, and we're going to try and keep ours mostly in check. So let us begin, and let us start here in Indiana. And, in a way, I wanted to begin this week on a sort of related, similar note, because, we're seeing in the aftermath of this Kirk assassination a lot of vitriol online. And it is interesting that this same week, Axios Indy, in conjunction with Chalkbeat Indiana, reported a story about youth gun violence in Indianapolis and how social media played a huge part in like a third of those cases. So again, this is from Axios. Since 2020, nearly 200 kids have been shot and killed in Indianapolis. Since 2018, over a third of those homicides involving Indianapolis youth, for which prosecutors have brought charges, have involved social media use, according to Marion County Court documents. So the way they explain this in the article, they say platforms like Instagram and others can expose vulnerable youth to a false reality where violence is typical. Students and experts say it can also amplify pre-existing drama between students before an audience of their peers, both during and outside of school hours. Chris, now you're not in Indianapolis. You're not shooting up people in the streets, to my knowledge. No. But does this sort of comport with the way your peers see things, that social media kind of gives you a warped sense of what things are really like out there in the world?
Yeah, I definitely think I see it, not just with my friends, but on my own social media pages and my own TikTok and Instagram reel algorithms, like we've been so desensitized to violence in general that, I could open up my Instagram reels right now and I could swipe through and I could find somebody getting hit by a car or somebody being shot. And that's just becoming, they're real things that happen in our world, but they're just becoming so much more normal for us to see. And I think it's so sad because it takes out all of the human aspects to just genuine humanity in general and allows us to pick up our phones and go and see some random acts of violence and not be so affected by it because we see it so often. And I think the more that we feed into that, the more that we see these things on social media, the more desensitized we will continue to be to these things. And when we do see true violence, we're not going to be able to know how to react to it because it's so normal to us already.
Yeah, 100%. Later in this article, they do go on to explain that there are effective strategies to kind of combat youth violence that social media is exacerbating. However, some of the techniques are like social emotional learning in school, which Indiana lawmakers have moved away from. They want teachers to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic, and not all that, learning how to be a person navigating the world, as well as things like school counselors. Again, Indiana is one of the worst states in the country for access to mental health resources in schools, as well as things like gun safety, which, again, we have not done anything about here in Indiana recently. Dee, do you see any of that stuff changing in response to things like this report, or like our legislators seeing people they respect killed in acts of gun violence?
Scott, I would say no, because I think depending upon how things are framed, that the actual results will be more division and not more coming together. You have to rebuild societal norms in order to make political violence or any kind of violence once again seem aberrant and not normal. And we're not doing that work. All we're doing is arguing about whatever red meat is thrown at us that day to argue about, and thereby degrading those cultural norms and not bringing them, building them back up. So I don't see it getting any better until leaders stop pushing divisive words and people on television stop saying we should kill homeless people, for example. That will get us nowhere real fast.
Yeah. We should focus on things we can all agree on, like the electric bill's too damn high. So this week, the state of Indiana's ratepayer advocate recommended denying AES, that's the corporate overlord of Indiana Power and Light, and other companies. So the state Office of Utility Consumer Counselor on Wednesday recommended that state regulators deny AES's request for a $193 million base rate increase, instead proposing a $21 million reduction in current rates. This conclusion comes after a 3-month legal and technical review of testimony and exhibits in the pending case, which is before the powerful Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. Freshly appointed counselor Abby Gray said AES, quote, has not demonstrated sufficient evidence for a hike, noting that the utility filed its ask less than 14 months after gaining approval for a previous rate case. Kurt, this is a Braun appointee at the Regulatory Commission, on the Consumer Advisory Council here. Are you surprised that Braun administrators are pushing back against some of their own corporate donors?
Well, surprised. Yeah, a little bit. Will it last? I doubt it. She'll probably be removed from office for some other reason. She'll be labeled incompetent, or that she's not doing her job properly or something. I can't see where speaking out against the man who put her in the position is going to be favorable for her, because this is not what our leadership in our state wants to hear. We know why rates are increasing tenfold, if not more, on utilities and other, commodities in our state, or things in our state. There's a huge amount of money that's being poured into not only Republican politicians in our state, but also Democrats, but mainly the Republican body of our state is fueled by a huge portion of these corporations who are just basically raping the citizens of Indiana blind, and there's no guardrails against them. And when you have a government that is allowing them to do this in the past, and has actually created laws and passed laws to allow this to happen, I mean, what do you think the outcome's going to be? They're going to take advantage of the system. So, good for her for speaking out. But I just wonder how long she's going to be around, or how long this is going to actually stand, because he's not going to want somebody underneath him speaking against what he believes in.
Braun did just appoint her recently, and he did say in the last couple months that that utility rates have gotten too high. So we'll see. I'm interested where this thing goes. Another thing I'm interested in where it goes. If you recall, last week we talked about Todd Rokita leading a multi-state effort to eliminate federal diversity requirements in transportation contracts. This week, the state, INDOT, the Department of Transportation here in Indiana, filed a waiver from the U.S. Department of Transportation, requesting that they do not need to abide by these Biden-era diversity rules, which require 10% of federal highway construction funds to be paid out to small businesses owned by, quote, socially and economically disadvantaged people. Now, Chris, you weren't here last week. We talked about this a little bit, but basically the contention is Rokita and the Braun administration say, listen, we're only here about merit and competence in giving out our state contracts. Democrats say, well, yeah, but you're not casting a wide enough net. What do you think about this?
I kind of
waiver.
I'm kind of in the middle of, I think, both arguments here. Where I think in terms of hiring process, in terms of getting people in, the jobs in the transportation sector, it should be merit based. I don't care about, gender, about race, about anything like that. That shouldn't matter. But what I do agree with is using some of those funds, especially surrounding transportation that has to do with school buses, that has to do with infrastructure and things like that. Lower income areas who don't have the funds to fix their infrastructure and put money towards schools and get buses for their children should be able to give a little extra weight for them to be able to handle that and to counteract all of those other things. So I would be in the middle of it. I'm completely in agreement on needing merit-based requirements for hiring processes, but then looking at the entire picture and seeing which areas truly need money and more money compared to others, then I think that's where we should put all of our resources, or most of them.
Yeah, and one of the points I think that was brought up last week was that when we're casting this net and making sure that maybe non-traditional companies get a chance to bid for these contracts outside of sort of the good old boys network, is that a lot of times, hey, this can save money. You are finding people who are equally qualified who can maybe do the job cheaper. So there is a fiscal responsibility element to this. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, here's another story that we've been following a little bit around here. We've talked about over the last several months that Union School Corporation in East Central Indiana was surprised to find that they are being shut down. It was snuck into the general budget bill in this last legislative session that they picked on this one tiny school corporation. So now, one of the things that this school corporation did have going for it is that they were a partner with an online virtual school. So this is from, Chalkbeat, Indiana. Once again, the Indiana Digital Learning School and the Indiana Digital Alternative School will be adding Beech Grove City Schools as their second district partner, while the Union School Corporation continues a legal battle against the state and Governor Mike Braun to stop the forced closure of the district. So, like we said, the provision to close Union schools was added last minute to a sweeping property tax reform bill during the 2025 session. If Union loses their legal fight, it will close all of its brick and mortar campuses that currently serve a little less than 300 students. So it's been unclear until now what would happen to the 7,500 or so students statewide who take classes through the online schools, which are operated by the for-profit company Stride K-12 in partnership with the district. So by adding Beech Grove as a secondary partner, what's happening is that the company's contract with Union is still active, but new virtual students from around the state will be enrolled in Beech Grove schools for the foreseeable future unless they express a preference for Union. So, Dee, the way I read that is, okay, we've got this virtual school, which there's all sorts of conflict of interest around that Stride company to begin with, but let's set that on the table, or set that aside for now. And just look at what's happening with Union. So this Beech Grove is now your secondary partner while Union goes through court. They're going to assign new virtual students statewide, mind you, to Beech Grove. So that money will go not to Union to keep that little school corporation afloat, but to go to Beech Grove. And you have to basically explicitly request that your funds go to Union School for now. Am I right in seeing that this is just kind of like a sly way of extracting this asset from the little school corporation and shutting them down?
No, you're right. That's exactly what's going on. And having raised my kids in rural schools and being a rural person myself, I can tell you that, if you live in the city and you either walk to school or you take a quick bus ride, it is nothing like getting on a bus at 6:15 in the morning and riding for an hour and a half when you have a small child. It's ridiculous. Back in the, 80s, when they decided to consolidate all the schools and have North and South and so forth, and get rid of all the little schools like Kirksville, close to where I live now, they found after, 10, 15 years of checking it out, that was not the best move. In fact, it was the worst move because it pulled those students away from home. It made parents less likely to come to school functions because they really couldn't, because they're farther away and they had to work and so forth. Especially if you're talking about family farmers and agriculture, those people, they have a hard time getting to anything as well. So this kind of move harms rural schools. Additionally, I see it as another movement inside the charter school push to try and get something that is actually possibly profitable wrested out of the hands of who did it and bringing it into the hands of who can make more money. The question that I will ask throughout this entire day is who profits? Who profits from this move? That should tell you all you need to know.
Yes, indeed. And I will again note that Stride K-12, the operator of this virtual school, is run by Tony Bennett, the former state school superintendent, who is now president at Stride. His wife is a superintendent down at Clarksville Schools, who also has a contract with Stride. And during the 2023 budget session, the last time lawmakers attempted to raise funding for virtual students, Indiana Capital Chronicle, who reported on that story, reported that House Speaker Todd Houston had consulted for Stride and served as Bennett's chief of staff previously. Yeah. So, listen, that screams ethical conflict in government. Let's talk about another raging ethical conflict in government, where this week we found that Indiana's Public Safety Secretary, Jennifer Ruth Green, has resigned. So this from the Capitol Chronicle. Green stepped down as Secretary of Public Safety, Governor Mike Braun announced last Saturday, marking the first major shakeup in his cabinet since taking office. Braun said Indiana State Police Superintendent Anthony Scott will take on an expanded role as the new Secretary of Public Safety. And Green said in her statement resigning, quote, "Many thanks to Governor Braun for the honor of serving as Indiana's inaugural Secretary of Public Safety. I'm honored to have worked alongside so many great leaders around the state. Secretary Scott will do an amazing job in this position, and I look forward to watching his successes. I'm off to military duty. Always a privilege to wear the uniform, and I'm excited for the future." Now, Green's military service is not a deployment, but it's a routine National Guard duty expected to last 1 or 2 weeks. She has been a rising figure in Republican politics since her 2022 run for Congress in Indiana's 1st District, where she mounted a pretty competitive challenge to Democratic Representative Frank Mervan, losing by less than 5 points in a traditionally blue district. So, Tim Edson, who served as Green's consultant on that congressional race, told the Capitol Chronicle that Green is seriously weighing another run for Congress in Northwest Indiana, and Republican leaders in Indiana and nationally are encouraging her to enter the race, right? So, okay, well, so she left to run for Congress again, right? Well, to quote former Indiana football coach and ESPN College Game Day legend Lee Corso, "Not so fast, my friend." It turns out a remediation agreement signed in July shows Jennifer Ruth Green was already the subject of an Inspector General investigation into alleged misuse of state resources and workplace misconduct before her sudden resignation last week. The document obtained by the Capitol Chronicle shows Mike Braun's office agreed to allow her to remain in her position pending the results of the Officer of Inspector General investigation, with appropriate safeguards in place to prevent additional ethics violations, including additional ethics training. So, among the allegations against Green are, this is a list, claims that she used state vehicles and travel cards for personal and political purposes, and that she directed state employees to assist with those activities during work hours. Additional accusations center around inappropriate workplace conduct, ranging from conversations with employees about personal relationships, intimate subjects, or sexual activities, to uninvited touching of employees and retaliation. The agreement alleged Green used state vehicles and travel cards for personal events. Further, the agreement suggests that Green promoted her book and her brand, Battle-Proven Leadership, during state time or with state employees and resources. She was also accused of asking staff to perform personal errands, including driving family members and completing tasks at her residence. Excuse me. Kurt, Green was in office since like January, man. Right. She's been busy, no, dog?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else I can add to this. You pretty much covered it. I mean, there you go. You know, I mean, that's the sum of the whole story. So
I know where she can get a job. She just needs to apply to the Trump administration. They'll take her in a minute.
Absolutely. She'll be hired in a second.
Well, I wanted to ask about that, Kurt. I mean,
Yeah.
so listen, this list is a mile long. I didn't even go through everything. Does she still have a future in Republican politics?
Well, absolutely. She fits the mold. I mean, come on, let's face it. This is what they do. This is who they are, and it will be ignored and it will go away because she is a Republican. I mean, this is what happens. Corruption and making money off of their positions is, part of the thing nowadays. So, I mean, that's the norm. That's been accepted. We turn a blind eye to this, unless it's a Democrat that does it. And then the world comes crashing down on them. So, this is, I mean, just like she did all of this in 7 months, and this is what we know. My God, I mean, and I just want to say one thing about the DEI thing, that people that want to get rid of DEI because they want merit-based hires to be done. That's what DEI is. It's based on merit, on your ability, on your skills. Okay. So it makes no sense. And of course, people that say that, they don't make sense because they don't understand what DEI actually is. And they prove it by saying, well, we want merit-based hires. Okay.
But with DEI also came things like quotas for specific populations and groups to be hired. So that doesn't always go with merit-based, because if you had a general pool and you're not trying to separate based on race, ethnicity, gender, or anything like that, then the cream will rise to the top, and it doesn't matter what background or group that they belong to. And
so because because there's been things like that added to it, we just do away with all of it then and bring it back to the point to where the white guy's going to get hired, because
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
I'm just saying that's what's happening with the destruction of DEI.
Let's see who rises to the top and who is the best candidate to be able to do the job effectively.
That's what DEI is.
No, that's what not always what DEI is. DEI is
absolutely
quotas for specific populations to go into jobs. And I'm not saying that all those people are unqualified, but I'm saying that qualified individuals sometimes are not selected because of specific race and background, because specific quotas are trying to be made. And that's true. And that is a big part of what DEI is, and why so many people want to do away with DEI. Nobody's saying we don't want diversity, we don't want equity, we don't want inclusion. We're saying, no, let's see who the best people are based on merit to be able to do the job the right way. And it's not based on whether they're black, they're white, they're Asian, they're transgender, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's who can do the best job.
So can we not adjust that quota? Can we not adjust that quota and the certain parts of it that people have a problem with? Or do we have to
Why do we need a quota at all? Why do we need a quota at all?
Listen, guys, this isn't even a DEI story, though. This is a story about.
I just wanted to chime in on the DEI because it's
vague, corruption. So now, speaking of corruption, though, I do want to move on to our next story here and look at, here's something that speaks to merit. Our Republican legislators in this state are trying to redraw our maps under pressure from Donald Trump. Not so the best candidate wins, so the chosen candidate wins in both Republican and Democratic designated districts. So, we've been following this one for weeks now, ever since the president encouraged Hoosier Republicans to call a special session to gerrymander our congressional maps mid-district unconstitutionally. So, this week, on Wednesday, Senate Republicans met for a couple hours behind closed doors at the State House. Routine caucus meeting. These happen fairly frequently, but not very often outside of session like we are now. Senators on their way to the meeting refused to answer where they stood on changing maps or where they believe the caucus as a whole is on the matter, according to Mirror Indy. So, Voting rights groups are escalating pressure on lawmakers to leave the maps as they are. Billboard ads are popping up around the state lobbying against a special session, and voting groups turned in nearly 9,000 petition signatures on Tuesday calling on Governor Braun, House Speaker Houston, and Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray to ignore pressure from the Trump administration to change the maps. Friday, House Republicans did the same thing, holding a brief meeting just a couple days after their Senate counterparts. Now, Capitol Chronicle editor-in-chief Nikki Kelly told WTHR 13 that her sources are telling her so far the maps, the votes, aren't there to change the maps. She says, quote, "My understanding in some of these caucuses, and we've had several, each side has had several now, is that many are still against that, perhaps even a majority, but they keep meeting to try and see if they can get some people to flip and move to the camp that they would support it. So really, it's just a wait and see right now." But we did get word this week that one Indiana Republican lawmaker has flipped from a, quote, hard no to a, quote, hell yes. Seymour Rep. Jim Lucas announced his reversal on Facebook and X just 2 weeks after he and his colleagues met with President Donald Trump on redistricting. So Lucas's endorsement prompted criticism from one of his colleagues, Kokomo Representative Heath Van Natter, a fellow Republican, who said, quote, "I knew you would fold. Maybe you should keep your powder dry next time." Now, Lucas didn't respond. Instead, on Thursday morning, he posted a lengthy explanation of his reasoning to Facebook. He says it wasn't the Kirk assassination or this Ukrainian refugee in North Carolina that caused him to change his mind. It was his own back surgery. He credited the Indiana Spine Hospital for being physician-owned and patient-focused, and says this is the way healthcare should be. If Democrats take control of the House, he wrote, places like this might go under, and the rest of Trump's reforms will be, quote, dead in the water. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to give Trump this reform possibility because the status quo from both parties is destroying America. That is why I'm a hell yeah on redistricting. Now, I should note here, Indiana Spine Hospital and its physician owners are huge Republican donors in the state of Indiana. Let's see. Dee, this is you, right? Thoughts on any of the redistricting? Thoughts on Lucas personally?
Oh, boy. We could be here a long time, but I know if there's football, so I gotta. Yeah, as we all know, Trish Whitcomb ran last cycle against Jim Lucas because of his drunkenness, his public drunkenness, his known drunkenness, his criminal drunkenness, his
drunken drivingness, yes.
Drunken drivingness, having accidents, flipping his gun at students who were up at the State House trying to say, please do something about gun safety. I don't believe a word that comes out of that guy's mouth, to be quite honest with you. So I'm absolutely unshocked that he would back off of his, anything to get a little bit of press, and he sure knows how to get it one way or the other. But as far as the redistricting is what I would call cheating. It's what I would call rigging an election. Nobody on this call or who's listening or who ought to be listening is for cheating and rigging elections. That's the entire idea of a democracy, if you will, is to have free and fair elections. And so this is not just an attempt, but it's an utter push to cheat, and I don't like it.
Yes. I think all of us on this call would like to see gerrymandering go away across the board nationwide. Now, a place where we might disagree and not say that the thing is cheating like we do with gerrymandering, is on this voter suppression thing. Now, Diego Morales, as we know, has been cooperating with the Trump administration and their crackdown on what they say is massive voter fraud, right? So, earlier last year, Morales shared the voter rolls for the whole state with the Department of Justice. Well, now it turns out the Department of Justice is turning over these state voter rolls to the Department of Homeland Security in a search for non-citizens. This data sharing comes after the DOJ this summer demanded that election officials in nearly 24 states turn over their voter lists, alarming some Democratic state secretaries of state and election experts. Even some Republican secretaries of state have declined to provide their full voter lists. Not our boy Diego. Again, he said his office has provided the personal information of the state's registered voters, nearly 5 million Hoosiers, to the Department of Justice. And Morales said he's complying with a letter from the Trump administration sent in recent weeks. Now, while the administration didn't describe how Homeland Security will use the voter rolls to search for non-citizens, the agency operates a powerful program called SAVE, Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, that can identify the immigration or citizenship status of an individual. SAVE was originally intended to help state and local officials verify the immigration status of individual non-citizens seeking government benefits, but U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is part of DHS, this spring refashioned it into a platform that can scan states' voter rolls if officials upload the data. So, listen, what's the payoff for all this, right? They're looking for voter fraud, right? Well, I'll tell you what, Diego says he's got some. You see this, Kurt? This week, this is from WFYI, public media in Indianapolis. Secretary of State Diego Morales says that system that flagged 1,600 people who need to provide the citizen proof, okay, that they turned in. Counties are responsible for canceling people's voter registration if they don't respond to the notice within 30 days. That could mean U.S. citizens with valid voter registration could have their registration canceled. But Morales said Vigo County, that's Terre Haute, found one man who submitted a Mexican passport as his proof of citizenship and allegedly confirmed to local officials that he is not a U.S. citizen. So, Kurt, the system works, right?
The system does work. Our system does work. And this voter fraud thing is just, it's a lie. It's a flat out lie. But this has been the narrative that has come from the dude in the White House ever since 2012, when he first started tweeting about the elections at that time, when Mitt Romney was running against Barack Obama. And he was tweeting that there were trucks pulled up to warehouses in Detroit unloading ballots. Does that sound familiar to anyone? I mean, he's using the same mantra over and over and over and over again. There has been two bills that have been presented on the national level that would have, stopped so much of the cheating that has occurred that has been blocked by Republicans when it came to like gerrymandering and forcing a vote or swaying a vote in a state's direction towards one party or the other, but they haven't done that. Now we have the SAVE Act that they're trying to pass that's going to strip away the rights to women from voting, that they will have to prove that the name that's on their birth certificate is the same name that they have on their driver's license and passports and whatever. So if you're married and you take a man's name, and that's the name you have on your ID, you won't be able to vote. It's been proven by research and data collected by the Brennan Center and other organizations that there is no voter fraud that takes place. It is a minuscule amount that actually happens. Undocumented immigrants are not allowed to vote. Okay. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. But this is a narrative. This is how you create an issue like this. You just repeat the same thing, and that's what happens. We say fake news, they're cheating, voter fraud, immigrants are bad, blah blah blah, and people eventually start to believe all of it, even though there's zero proof of it at all. Okay,
and we know the way these things work, right? These narratives about voter fraud are perpetuated to just to make voting harder, to add hoops, basically for people to jump through. And it turns out the people that have to have a hard time jumping through hoops are the folks that usually vote for Democrats.
And it's being done by Republicans because they know the numbers are with the Democrats. And if Democrats simply would show up and vote, we would win. And that's why it's being done. There is not voter fraud. In fact, most of the voter fraud that took place in the 2020 election was committed by Republicans, by fake electors, by making a phone call asking for votes. Yeah. I mean,
well, that, and also just, the small number of cases of like actual like voter fraud. It's like,
right.
Somebody who has a house in Michigan and a house in Florida and they voted both. That's not something that like your average American can do, because most of us have a hard enough time affording one place,
one house.
I do need to move on, Chris. I know you're chomping at the bit for one here, and so I'm going to ask you about higher education here. So we found this story again, the Capitol Chronicle, and folks, just take a second. Go subscribe to them. An indispensable source of news in the state of Indiana. I cannot recommend their work enough. I rely on it a whole hell of a lot. But this week, we find that canceled federal grants cost Indiana education institutions millions of dollars. So the nation's largest scientific research funder abruptly canceled hundreds of millions of dollars in grants earlier this year, specifically targeting projects that address diversity, inclusion, or vaccines. Now, who is this largest scientific research funder? Well, it's the National Institutes of Health. So, 21 grants across 4 Indiana higher education institutions, totaling $24.5 million, were lost. Okay. So, more than half of these canceled projects from the NIH, about 14 million, are for projects at IU Indianapolis, specifically the School of Medicine. Purdue lost nearly $6.2 million in grants, Notre Dame $3.2 million, and IU Bloomington here, only 3 projects for a combined $641,000. But 2 of those may be restored following legal battles. Okay, so we're in decent shape here in Bloomington, right? No, there's an additional $15.5 million in grants to Indiana schools under the National Science Foundation that were canceled. Under that program, Bloomington lost $6.2 million, Ivy Tech $238,000, Purdue $8 million, Notre Dame $642,000. All right, listen, that's just a lot of numbers. What kind of research, what kind of valuable information are we potentially losing out with these canceled grants? Okay, here's one for you. At Notre Dame, a $2 million award to chemistry professor Juan Del Valle, who is studying a type of molecular bonding common in certain Alzheimer's patients and finding ways to selectively disrupt it. His research was flagged by the NIH because it contained the words trans and diverse. The project's abstract refers to cellular transmission at various points and diverse modes of B-sheet packing. Additionally, the word barrier might have sunk a $5.7 million IU School of Medicine glaucoma study. Professor Jason Meyer, a molecular geneticist, sought to identify ways to replace certain cells within the eye's nerves that are damaged by glaucoma, which is the leading cause of irreversible blindness in the world. Where did he run afoul? The project's title, Overcoming Barriers to Retinal Ganglion Cell Replacement in Experimental Glaucoma. Chris, listen. I know you're a conservative, you're a Republican, you don't want to see wasteful government spending, but, like, they've totally gone overboard, right?
Completely. And I just think it's no matter what side of the aisle you're on, if you are taking away money from research towards Alzheimer's and glaucoma and things that so many Americans deal with and struggle with every single day, and you're just completely like halting all of the progress that we're making on things like that. No, I think it's awful, and that it shouldn't be done. It feels like they're just like putting Command F into everything and looking trans or diversity and stuff like that. And or like an AI is trying to flag when it sees the words, right? Nobody's really looking into these things because medicine shouldn't be political. I don't see medicine as political. And, there's different effects of different medications, and we could talk about that, right? But all of the stuff that the government is funding isn't trying to, cause division or, make a certain medicine for one type of group and not for another. It's like, this is for collective humanity right here. This is not just for the country. This is for the world. And we should be the leaders in innovation and creation, and be the first step in medical research and be the example for countries across the world. So I do disagree with that, like, wholeheartedly, of having to of needing that funding from the federal government. And as a true Republican who believes in like a smaller big government, I still think that the government, who has so much money, should be funding a lot of these places, because one, it's gonna benefit the economies of those places if we're continuing to put money into it, and we're gonna continue to fund doctors and innovate and create these new pieces of infrastructure. That's gonna help economies, and then it's gonna help the whole world as a result, because we are going to be that leader in breaking down barriers, in creating change, and creating breakthroughs. And right now, we are halting all the breakthroughs that we can possibly make in the future.
And if you want to look at it from a shameless capitalist perspective, this is bad for capital. All of this research stuff, so much of that doesn't pan out, but you got to do it. Hoping to find that gold nugget, and that gold nugget can turn into, like, I don't know, the internet. You can base your entire economy on
exactly.
it. Like,
and I think that's the thing with scientific research too, is like, you get so much out of realizing that something doesn't work. Right. And like, even though like you sometimes show somebody like, okay, like we did this experiment and we didn't cure Alzheimer's, but we found out that this has an effect on Alzheimer's patients. And that, based on this result, we can try a new experiment that may be able to target a new gene, right? Like, failures in science is what makes science continue to progress and allows us to continue to progress. And so we can't say this worked, so we can continue to fund it, or this didn't work, so we should stop. No, if it failed, there's a reason it failed, and we have to continue to fund it to be able to get to that proper point where we have success in it.
Yeah. The science, the literal definition of it is fuck around and find out.
Well, literally, I'm taking a biology class right now. Like, I have to take because I'm a government and education major, but I have to take a lab still. And we like, it's a 100 level biology class, but like, we started out with just creating a hypothesis, the scientific method, creating an experiment, and how failure from experiment leads to more experiments being done, and then at the end of the day leads to greater change.
Yes. Thank you. And then the last thing I want to discuss here in Indiana this week, and we will stay on the college campuses, and this one from the Indianapolis Star. Indiana University ranked as U.S. worst public college for free speech. In Tuesday's rankings, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression tanked IU's score largely because leadership canceled a speaker in response to the anti-DEI movement and placed a sniper atop the student union during the 2024 pro-Palestine encampment. So FIRE, which is if I may say, FIRE acronym, is a nonpartisan organization that defends First Amendment rights across the political spectrum. Survey company College Pulse ranked the campus speech environment of 257 public and private universities each year. It uses student surveys, policy wording, and university decisions to calculate each college's score. For years, FIRE has criticized the university for actions it says violate the First Amendment and damage the free speech climate. Like last year, FIRE highlighted IU in its report, pointing to the school's response to pro-Palestine advocacy and the cancellation of multiple speaking events and an art exhibit, among other examples. just this June, a couple months ago, a district court judge ruled IU likely violated the campus community's First Amendment rights when it made an abrupt change to its expressive activities policy in reaction to the encampment. The university later revised its policies. Dee, you went to IU. Thoughts?
Well, I not only went to IU, but my office was right across from Dunn Meadow when I worked at IU for 13 years in student affairs. And, you know, at lunch, you could go out and hear any number of different opinions, many of which I utterly disagreed with. But Dunn Meadow was designated.
Pastor Dan there when you were on campus there, Dee?
Always around somewhere, yelling and hollering at everybody going by. And you just, you know, how are you? But yeah, I mean, that's why, you know, Chris can tell you this. Why do you come to university? You come to university to learn something in depth and to meet new people and to be exposed to all kinds of different things. So you can make up your own mind as to what it is you want to do with yourself and what it is you think about things, and to be pushed and prodded and all of those wonderful things that make us the people that we, you know, can grow up to be. And so I think that putting a sniper on the roof was outrageous and horrible. I agree with that. And that never should have happened. And it got such attention, negative attention, that we now are getting even further negative attention from that. I'd also like to point it out that the cancellation of the so-called DEI speaker, that was pretty interesting to me, because Charlie Kirk was scheduled to speak at Indiana University Bloomington in October. So why wasn't he called for his DEI? I mean, you know, it doesn't make any sense. And so coming up with weak excuses for cutting into First Amendment rights, which we have, and that's part of the Constitution, and I'm sorry, that's bigger than all of us, I think is a shame, and I think we probably deserve it.
Yeah. Hey, listen, not all bad news, though, at Indiana colleges in this report. So Purdue sits on the opposite end of the rankings as the country's top public university for its First Amendment environment, though the group notes that could change next year. See, it turns out Purdue's institutional neutrality commitment is in question after they've distanced themselves from their own student newspaper ahead of this school year. And this decision took place after FIRE's data collection period for the year had ended. Kurt, any last comments maybe on the Purdue angle of that before we move on to our national and international stories?
I'm not going to comment on Purdue because I've never been a fan of Purdue University, and you know, so I'm gonna plead the fifth on that. But I do agree with Dee, though. All of this is just it's a violation of our First Amendment rights, and putting a sniper on top of a building is a form of martial law. So I mean, it's whether you think that or not, it is when you have a gunman overseeing protesters that are exercising their constitutional right, regardless of what your feelings are on it. But we know why this is happening at IU and you know what's going on down there. So
yeah, it turns out shooting people from roofs or even threatening such because of what they say is not good in any case.
It's kind of bizarre. Yeah.
So listen, let's move on. Let's go on ahead and talk about our international and national stories this week. And I do want to start on the international front because, man, there is a ton of international news this week, whereas most of our U.S. stories are, let's say, Charlie Kirk-centric. Again, we'll talk about those in the last third of the show. But first, hey, look, a democracy can hold attempted coup attempters accountable. This one, starting from the BBC, the former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, has been sentenced to 27 years and 3 months in prison after being found guilty of plotting a military coup. A panel of 5 Supreme Court justices handed down the sentence just hours after they had convicted the former leader. They ruled he was guilty of leading a conspiracy aimed at keeping him in power after he lost the 2022 election to his left-wing rival, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Bolsonaro was found guilty of 5 charges, all relating to his attempt to cling to power after he was beaten in the 2022 elections. But prosecutors said he had started to plot to stay in power long before proposing a coup to military commanders and sowing unfounded doubts about the electoral system. Man, sound familiar. So the justices found he had led a conspiracy and also convicted 7 of his co-conspirators, including senior military officers. Among them are 2 former defense ministers, a former spy chief, and a former security minister. Okay, sounds like a good deal to me. Well, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not seem to agree with this sentence, saying that the Supreme Court in Brazil had, quote, unjustly ruled to imprison former President Jair Bolsonaro and threatened to respond accordingly to this witch hunt. Brazil's foreign ministry reacted swiftly, posting on X that threats like the one made today by Rubio in a statement that attacks a Brazilian authority and ignores the facts and the compelling evidence on record will not intimidate our democracy. Hey, Chris, thoughts? This is how you're supposed to handle an attempted coup, yeah?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I won't get into like details specifically on Bolsonaro and everything. I don't know specific details surrounding Brazil and everything right now, but I will say that no, that's the way that it's supposed to happen. An election happens, and somebody tries to cling on to power, then I mean, not thankfully the coup happened, but people rally together, democracy prevails, and you try to get that guy out of power. I just think if we're this big pro-democracy country and we want to promote democracy across every single border across the world and have the people elect their leaders, then we should be held accountable to free and fair elections as well, and recognizing free and fair elections in other places. And when somebody tries to cling on to power, to be able to recognize that and see the evidence of what the people in that country decided, and then support the people's decision, not a specific political figure. So I don't love the reaction from it, from Rubio. I don't have all of the information on how the election played out, how everything was. So I'm not coming from a place of extreme knowledge behind Brazil, their electoral system, everything like that. So I would have to do more research on it. But from what I hear and what it sounds like is that we should be supporting the vote of the people and not one specific person trying to cling on to power.
Yeah, and I don't have to tell you or anybody else here in this room that the U.S. has a checkered record when it comes to respecting the electoral decisions of other countries, and that is a bipartisan.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Now, and really, if there's any one theme from this section of our show today, it is that the U.S.-led world order is kind of just crumbling all around us. You can see it in things like, I don't know, our Secretary of State standing up for the coup plotter, and also in things like this from The Guardian. Israel's strike on Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar on Tuesday, which also killed a Qatari officer, marked an unprecedented moment for the Gulf Kingdom. The attack undercut the assumptions that has underpinned Qatari foreign policy for 3 decades and reverberated across the Arab region. Be useful to the United States, and it will protect you. Well, that is now in question, yeah? Israel's attack on Qatar, a major non-NATO ally of the U.S., targeted Hamas leaders who had gathered to discuss a new ceasefire proposal in the war on Gaza put forth by the U.S. The leadership survived, but 6 people were killed, including a Qatari security officer. So, for decades, this arrangement has held in the Middle East, right? The U.S. supplies arms, puts its aircraft carriers in the Gulf, provides political cover, and that support has helped spare many Gulf nations from the unrest that has consumed much of the Middle East, despite their rivalry with Iran, right? Well, that changed when the U.S. failed to stop the strike on Qatar this week, despite Israel being one of its closest allies. Now, Donald Trump said he tried to give a warning, but Qatar said it was only notified after the strike. The message taken from this was not that Washington cannot control Israel, which it arms and equips to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, but it does not want to rein it in. Trump's ability to call back Israeli jets on their way to bomb Tehran last month showed or was that the month before? Regardless. Anyway, it showed he has the leverage when he chooses to use it. So, Rubio, we discussed in our last story, just landed in Israel, I want to say, this morning, to discuss the war on Gaza after this Israeli strike. Rubio's trip comes after Trump criticized Israel over the brazen and failed attack on Hamas leaders. So Netanyahu is still vowing that this perhaps won't be an isolated incident, despite U.S. promises that it won't happen again. Kurt, what the hell's going on here, man? Like, I mean, we know Israel's gotten out ahead of the U.S. Several times over the last couple years, but I mean, they're bombing a U.S. ally now.
Israel is a problem on so many levels and so many different angles, and both parties are to blame and should have blame put on them, and it's a touchy subject to talk about, because people, you want to talk about something that people get fired up about. The situation in Gaza and Israel. This is one of the hot topics in our country right now. This has caused so much issues in our own country. But this is what happens when you give, I don't want to say free reign, but when you continuously just pour money into and give money to someone like Netanyahu, the ego starts to take over, and they feel like they can basically do whatever they want to do. And the fact that the dude said, I tried to get a hold of, it's funny how in one situation, it's the tough guy, and he shows how, he's going to take control and he's going to get this done. And, well, I tried. I mean, give me a break. It's laughable to a lot of us. It's simply laughable, but things are only going to get worse. Tensions are rising across the world right now, not just in the Middle East, but across the world. And this guy is making enemies of many, many allies that we've had for decades. Changing the Department of Defense to the Department of War. What kind of message do you think that sent to our global friends and allies and adversaries? So
it's a rare bone of honesty. You very good points. You talk about it not just being the U.S., it not just being the Middle East. This is all over the world, and I want to move on and talk about some of this, because we've got stories from country after country after country this week about major protests or even governments falling. Let's move east into Asia, into the Himalayas, and look at the country of Nepal, where this week protests fanned by dissatisfaction over the government's ban on several popular social media platforms soon snowballed into a wider discourse on corruption and unemployment, as Generation Z, people in their teens and 20s, took to the streets with banners and slogans. At least 51 people were killed and more than 1,300 were injured in the nationwide protests that erupted after the government tried to shut down social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram, causing deep anger to boil over. Now, that anger had already been there, and this social media thing was kind of the last straw. So, protests turned violent as security forces used live bullets, tear gas, and batons, while demonstrators toppled barricades, looted businesses, and set fire to government offices and politicians' residence. The prime minister and 4 of his ministers resigned last week, and the military took over the capital, immediately enforcing a nationwide curfew. So after Mr. Ali, the now former prime minister, resigned, and the exodus of senior political figures left a power vacuum, activists took to Discord to plan their next steps, according to NDTV. This outlet reported that one server with more than 145,000 members hosted a debate about who could be an interim leader. Over the week, multiple polls were held by representatives of the protest movement on the platform to nominate possible leaders, and they wound up choosing 73-year-old Sushila Karki, a former Chief Justice, who would be the first woman to lead the country. She will assume a caretaker role until elections in March of 2026. Dee, thoughts on Nepal?
People can only take so much. And apparently that's how strong social media is. You threaten to take it away, and oh my gosh, look what happened here when we passed a law to get rid of TikTok because it's spying on everybody. Well, so let them spy. Your choice. You can download it and have them look at your stuff, and that's okay too. But there's a law in the books of that, and it's not being enforced. This is exactly why. I know that my grandkids' generation would go nuts if you took their stuff away like that, because that's how they communicate now. It's how I communicate now. If I want to talk to anybody, it's how you communicate. So,
hell, look, they're governing by Discord now.
Right. Well, okay.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't like Discord so well, but oh well. But it's again.
It is what you make of it.
It's who profits off this. Okay, think about it that way. And also, just like what's going on most everywhere in the world, try standing in their shoes and then see how you would feel, and you can often understand how these things break out and how they happen. And of course, one person does it, the next person does it, next thing you have a riot. So it's unfortunate, but it's a symbol, I think, of what's going on in the world. And I think it also is in good part thanks to the unrest here. Places around the world are feeling a little more able to raise hell because the whole vacuum. We've been a leader, and look at what's going on here. And so there's really is a vacuum, I think.
Yeah, well, let's stay in Asia and move a little further east to the Philippines, where we found out, and this is from ABC News, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s administration have been investigating alleged substandard and non-existent flood control projects in separate televised inquiries. Dozens of legislators, senators, construction companies, and public works engineers were identified and accused of pocketing huge kickbacks that financed lavish lifestyles and high-stakes casino gambling. This corruption scandal has been especially sensitive in the poverty-stricken Southeast Asian country that is prone to deadly typhoons and floodings that devastate entire towns and villages multiple times each year. So, the Philippines have spent an estimated 545 billion pesos, that's a little less than $10 billion, for thousands of flood mitigation projects in the last 3 years. The projects were under government review to determine which ones are substandard or non-existent, as Marcos said he has found during recent inspections he led in some flood-prone provinces. including Bulacan, a densely populated province north of Manila. So, what's going on here, Chris? Do you have comments on what looks to be like massive government corruption in the Philippines? And, where does the buck stop in that situation?
You know what? I mean, I don't. It's obvious corruption. I think, like in plain terms, right there. I don't know a good amount about the structure of the Philippine government and everything like that. But it would make sense that it's like it seems like an easy avenue for corruption because like it's the Philippines. Like there's gonna be floods, there's gonna be all of this. Like it makes sense to go and put like social money towards those projects, right? So if you're just a citizen in the Philippines right now, it's like, oh, we're protecting against flood damage. Like that sounds great. Like this is supposed to happen. So I think what the glaring thing for me was just the ease, like the ability for corruption to take place when it looks like everything they're doing it for a good cause, kind of, right? And it's just the susceptibility of people and their trust in the overall government that they will do things for them. And we should expect that from all of our governments, that they're going to do right by us, and a lot of the times they don't. So I think that's like the naivety, but like it's a forced naivety, like of citizens to their government, that their government is going to try to protect them and do right by them, right? Like that shouldn't be a question, but obviously it is so many places, and it's just completely taking advantage of their citizens and what they think they're getting.
Yeah, and this dynamic, shouldn't seem foreign to us. It sounds like, you've got the rich elites pocketing public money and not using it for public purposes. And, I think we've got a pretty significant problem like that in this country ourselves. So, relatable, very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move to Europe and look at France. So now, if you recall, a couple years ago, they had those big yellow vest protests. There's been bubbling unrest in France for a few years now. Well, Wednesday, a day of anti-government action across the country, saw streets choked with smoke, barricades in flames, and volleys of tear gas as protesters denounced budget cuts and political turmoil from the Associated Press. The nationwide Bloquons Tout, or Block Everything campaign, presented a challenge to President Emmanuel Macron and turned Sébastien Lecornu's first day as prime minister into a baptism of fire. So this is the new prime minister's first day. Sorry, where are we? There we are. So, just Monday, the old Prime Minister, François Bayrou, lost a no-confidence vote in Parliament. Macron appoints this new guy, Lecornu, and folks are not terribly happy with this. So one student, Baptiste Sagot, 21, says, one prime minister has just been ousted, and straight away we get another one from the right. They're trying to make working people, young students, retirees, all people in difficulty, bear all the effort instead of taxing wealth. Kurt, now I don't know if you know about the Yellow Vest protests that they had a couple years ago. Those were widely regarded as sort of a right-wing populist protest. And here you have sort of like left-wing populist protests. Does this sort of mirror what's happening in the U.S. too, as you see the sort of center consensus falling apart with attacks from the populist outside?
So they're placing the burden on the working man and reducing taxes to the rich and not. I mean, I don't see how that's like what we're doing here.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
being
it's
sarcastic.
what
I'm being sarcastic.
yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a mirror image. I mean, this is what, right wing conservatism, whatever you want to call it. It's creating problems in many countries across the world right now, and that's why I think you're seeing so many protests taking place. I mean, just like the story you just talked about. What was the guy's name? If anybody knows anything about the Marcos family, I mean, was that not expected to happen? And the thing that's going on in here, when you take one piece of crap out of office and you put another one in, how do you think the people are going to respond? And I don't want to call them fascists or whatever, but when people of power like this try to control the public, they don't see a problem with that. They don't look at that as being an issue. But when the people protest against that and take to the streets, that's a problem. And this is what's happening, not only here, but we see in other countries. And I don't know what the end game is going to be. I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime. And that's what scares the hell out of me, is because this is something that, how long is this going to go on? What's it going to take to stop this kind of rich man good, poor man bad type attitude? Because that's basically what it is. In our country here alone, it's everybody talks about entitlement programs and everything, and they expect the burden to be placed on the working man, and they continue to raise the cost. They want to make us poor. They want to control us, and the same thing's happening in Nepal and in France and in other places across the world. The protests in Nepal, they took away their social media. Well, I'm not familiar with, but how is their media controlled? Their regular media, are they giving actual media to the people, or did the people react this way because Facebook and Instagram is their only avenue to receive outside information or world information and news? I don't know those facts. So, but the situation in France, I mean, this is Europe has a fire burning on both ends of the country, and it's going to come together somewhere. And it's just,
well, we're talking about the sort of the center not holding, right? The rules based order and like global capitalism is what we're talking about. Like the neoliberal era. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, he's a neoliberal, very much the way like Biden or Clinton or George W. Bush or Reagan. The way that general kind of concept has dominated the world for the last 40, 50 years. It's falling apart, and it's falling apart from both sides. And we see, in France, the right and the left are both tired of it. In this country, the right and the left are both tired of it. And we see elsewhere in Europe, a lot of this upset with the system, and there are plenty of reasons to be upset with neoliberal global order, but a lot of it is being pushed by Russia, and you see that in a place like Slovakia, which also had massive protests this week, where thousands gathered in the capital of Bratislava on Thursday to protest a meeting between their prime minister, Robert Fico, and Russian President Vladimir Putin in an escalation of previous protests against Fico's pro-Russia stance. So, this latest wave of protests were fueled by a trip by Fico to China, where he again met with Putin and other authoritarian leaders. He traveled to Beijing for that military parade last week we talked about. He was the only head of a European country the only head of an EU country, rather, to attend the event, where he discussed bilateral relations with Putin, a recent plan for, here we are, austerity measures, like we talked about in these other countries, presented by the government, is set for debate on Friday and was another target of the protesters' ire. So this Fico guy has long been a divisive figure in Slovakia and beyond. Now, He returned to power for the 4th time after his nominally leftist party, Schmer, or Direction, won the 2023 parliamentary election after campaigning on a pro-Russia and anti-American message. He has openly challenged the EU's policies over Ukraine, while his critics have charged that Slovakia, under Fico, is following the direction of Hungary under Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is regarded by many as an autocrat. Dee, you have any thoughts on Slovakia?
Well, sure. But I think that, you talked about austerity, and did I ask today who profits?
Yep.
It's,
Once or twice.
it's not the people who are experiencing the austerity that profit. Okay, they're the ones that are paying the profits to those who are getting them. There's a reason that the oligarchs and the dictators of the world are the richest people, because they're extracting the money out of those who earn it with their labor and pay for it, and they disappear with it. And you'd think that they'd go lay on a beach somewhere, but oh no, that power kind of goes to the head a little bit. And you think, well, if I just get a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and they just keep at it. In the meantime, it's like a leech. You can't bleed somebody only so much; they run out of blood. And so people are not going to be happy the less and less that they see that they have, while the people on top are living in gold-plated houses and stuff. That's not democracy, first of all, but it's also what will cause even people that think they have no power to come together. People together have power.
Yes. So, finally, in Europe, another country experiencing some internal turmoil, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić is escalating his crackdown on protests that have shaken his populist rule in recent months. What began as a small student-led campaign against corruption has snowballed into one of the most turbulent protest waves in the Balkan country in a quarter of a century. Last week, tanks rolled through Belgrade in preparation for a military parade on September 20th. If the parade becomes a flashpoint for unrest, protesters feared the military could remain on the streets. This Vučić guy has ruled Serbia for more than a decade, reshaping its politics while drawing accusations of corruption and authoritarianism again. He began his political career in the 90s as a hardline nationalist in the Serbian Radical Party, becoming information minister under the late war criminal Slobodan Milosevic. He was notorious for his calls to punish independent media and his wartime rhetoric against Serbia's neighbors, which he maintains to this day. If you recall, last November, a canopy collapsed at a railway station in the northern city of Novi Sad, killing at least 16 people. Protesters have been demanding accountability, transparency, and early elections since. European Union officials have warned Vučić that progress toward EU membership depends on meeting certain standards, including reforms in the judiciary, media freedoms, and the fight against corruption. At a time when Europe is dealing with the repercussions of Russia's war in Ukraine, the EU has so far shown little willingness to confront Vučić and his government. Chris, any thoughts on Serbia and Vučić and that country's internal turmoil?
I'm actually going to pass on this one because I really have to go to the bathroom and I cannot think before going. So I will be right back, but I'll be here to answer about Russia. So I'll be back.
Absolutely. We're going to let Chris walk for a second. And in the meantime, Kurt, do you have any thoughts about Vučić and Serbia, or is it just the same story again, right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate we're talking about all these, but all you're doing is just interjecting different country names and different leaders' names, and it's the same old story. This is what's happening,
right?
Globally. So, it's people are protesting, people are pissed off, and the I mean, I'm not trying to fearmonger or anything, but the world's on fire, and there's going to be a head that comes to it at some point in time, and people need to pay attention. It's this is the only way we have. This is the only power that people have when you have oligarchs and just fascists and dictators and rulers who just think they can do whatever the hell they want to do. The only thing that people can do is to fight back, is to protest. And then when we are the ones that are criminalized for it and pointed to and said, you're the problem, and we roll tanks through it. I mean, they're rolling tanks through the city. You said, where's that sound like? LA. Wow. Threats of Chicago, DC. I mean, that's what's happening in our country. We're taking our military weaponry and rolling it into our cities because we don't like the fact that people are protesting. And for the most part, the protests are not violent, and they're peaceful. Okay. A lot of the violence that has occurred, like in Indiana, back in the No Kings March, the only violent incident that occurred was in Lafayette when a dude jumped out of his truck with a rifle and walked up to the protesters. That was the only case of violence that occurred on that day. So, but they're suppressing people and taking away their right to speak. They don't like it. Fascists don't like to be questioned. They like obedience. And when the populace questions them, it makes them uneasy. And the only thing that they know to do to try to retaliate, instead of maybe changing policies and making things a little bit better for people, is to use their military and to show their might, because that's who they are, and that's the simplicity of their way they think. I mean, most of the problems that are caused in these countries are because of the policies that these governments have made, and that includes us here. You don't fight crime by showing a mass military force. That's not how you do it. That incites people. That's not how you do it. You create policies. You create avenues for people to seek help and to educate people. But we're doing the exact opposite, and I'm sure it's happening in a lot of these countries. They're taking away. We can't rely on statistics here anymore because of what's happened. We can't rely on proper information because it's being held from us. If the numbers come out and they don't like them, well, we're going to change that. And I'm sure this is happening in these countries around the world. I mean, it's scary times, and I try to pay attention to globally, but there's so much here that we have to pay attention to that. Hey, some of it slips through because there's I can't even keep track of everything here, and that is
Well,
that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Bad news, because we're going to keep talking about international news, and we're going to look at Serbia's longtime ally and perhaps the pinnacle of a fascist regime that kind of does things however they want. We look at Russia, and while the world's falling around of its own volition, Russia's certainly doing its part to maybe push it in that direction. So in the early hours Wednesday, 3 Russian drones were shot down after crossing into Polish airspace. Polish officials previously said there were 19 intrusions of the country's airspace and that a large proportion of the drones entered from Belarus. A total of 16 drones were found throughout the country, Poland's interior minister said on Wednesday, spread all over the span of area of hundreds of square miles, right? So now, although Russian drones and missiles have trespassed into some NATO members' airspace before, this was the most serious incident of its kind since Moscow launched its full invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. So, in response to this, on Friday, NATO launched Operation Eastern Sentry, sending a bunch of equipment to the Eastern Front, F-16 fighter jets and an anti-air warfare frigate from Denmark, 3 jets from France, and 4 Eurofighters from Germany, according to a NATO press release. Well, I guess that wasn't much of a impediment or a a sign to slow down to the Russians, because just yesterday, Polish military said they had no more airspace violations, but farther south along the NATO eastern flank, a Russian drone violated Romanian airspace, according to a statement published by the Defense Ministry in Bucharest. Chris, yeah, I know you were looking forward to talking about Russia. You looking forward to World War III there, buddy? Oh, you're on mute, man.
Sorry about that. But I have to say, Nikki Haley was right all along. If you go back to the during the Republican primaries 2 years ago, obviously Russia, Ukraine was a huge deal. And she said, like, this is all about, like, having Ukraine's back, supporting Ukraine is all about preventing war, right? Russia, and she laid it out perfectly. Dictators love to tell you exactly what they're going to do. They're not going to try to hide behind. They're going to tell you exactly what they're going to do, right? Putin said once he takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That's a world war, and we're seeing it happen already. So this has all been about, and what is needed to happen has been about preventing war. How do we support Ukraine, cripple Russia, and not allow them to continue to expand? Trump just put more sanctions onto Russia. He's encouraging all NATO allies to do the same. And I think the thing that we can really do as an international body is to truly put those sanctions on Russia and stop buying Russian oil. And we need to cripple their economy. We need to cripple the biggest funder of their military, which is their oil production. So if we get NATO countries to stop buying their Russian oil, cripple their economy, and as a result, I mean, they're losing hundreds of thousands of soldiers at a time. They have North Koreans coming in to backfill, right? So they're not actively winning this war, but they're putting on the facade like they are. Right. And then they're going into Poland and doing everything like that. And they can put on that facade because they have the money to continue to do it. So if we cripple them economically, I think then we can start to see the power structure of Putin and Russia start to crumble.
I for one, would like to apologize to 2012 era Mitt Romney. We all laughed at him when he said that Russia was the U.S.'s greatest geopolitical foe at that point. And we were like, come on, Mitt, you're living in the past. It's China, right? Yeah. Well, you know what? Mitt might have been right on that one. We're sorry.
I didn't laugh. I didn't laugh.
I always wonder like if Mitt was our president, or where the party would be right now if he had won.
Well, I tell you, Chris,
somewhere different for sure.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, how do you know when Putin's lying? He opens his mouth, right? I mean, he just lies with impunity. He doesn't care. He is interested in making himself even richer, even though he's supposedly the richest person in the world. In fact, not openly, but in fact. But I think that the reason that he's pushing, which is what he's doing, he's pushing to see what he can get by with and how far he can go, because I think that we have been very weak here by trying to, show that, well, we'll coddle him a little bit and see if that works. That doesn't work with a dictator. You have to hit the dog upside the head with a stick to get its attention. You don't give it a milk bone when it bites you. And we have shown weakness, and he is pushing it to see how far he can get. I am glad that Europe is coming back, and I agree with Chris 100%. We have to lay on him and lay on him hard.
So I want to bring this thing from the international realm to stateside here, but in a way this story is related. So before the Charlie Kirk assassination on Wednesday, the big, I feel like, right-wing divisive story that they were using to stir up hate and division around things like crime was this really sad story out of Charlotte, North Carolina, where last month a Ukrainian refugee named Irina Zarutska was riding Charlotte light rail when she was attacked from behind, unprovoked, by a guy named DeCarlos Brown, 34 years old, a ton of prior convictions, had done time for armed robbery, has a history of mental illness, and has been charged with first-degree murder. Now, it didn't receive a whole lot of attention initially, but after the closed-circuit television footage was released, Republican lawmakers and far-right influencers really pounced on this thing. Trump used her death as an excuse to justify expanding his National Guard deployments to other cities, arguing that, Democratic leaders like the, electeds in Charlotte, for example, cannot manage crime effectively. He repeatedly referenced this attack on social media, calling the suspect a career criminal and blaming Democrats for failing to enforce the law. Kurt, is this you? I think it's Kurt's turn. Kurt, thoughts on this? Sad story, but it's like random crime, right? I mean, this is not anyone's fault other than this guy, is it?
No, I mean, I don't know the complete story about the guy, but from what I've seen, I'm sure he was under the influence of something, and had some issues. Obviously, to commit something like that or to do something like that randomly when there was no provoked instance or situation that happened that that we can tell. So, but hey, it's yeah. I mean, it's a singular event that we want to jump on and make a huge thing out of it. And not saying that the loss of a life is not a huge thing, but it's a way of, and I'm trying to be respectful here, but it's just a way. Here's the hypocrisy, okay? We've got Republicans that are in outrage because this Ukrainian was attacked and her life was taken. Yet we support Russia in the war against Ukraine. Does that have any correlation with each other? Well, I don't know, but that's as absurd, a comparison is what I think making, this a headline. We don't talk about singular attacks on people unless it has something to do with a black man or an immigrant. Those stories seem to get put to the forefront. We don't talk about trans getting attacked and stabbed and murdered. We don't talk about black people who are unnecessarily attacked or beaten. And I'm not saying that it's not reported. It is, but not like this is. So, you can't, can you call it propaganda? Yeah. Can you call it propaganda news? I mean, no, it's the death of an individual that didn't deserve to die. Nobody deserves to be murdered, but my God, I mean, seriously, this is where,
And Chris, I see you want to speak up here. No amount of police or National Guard would have prevented this.
No, but at the same time, it is still based on policy. This man was convicted 14 times and still was on the streets. He was convicted of kidnapping a 9-year-old girl, of domestic violence, of DWI, aggravated harassment. This wasn't a guy who should have been on the streets to begin with. And he was convicted 14 times before that. And our legal system allowed him to be on the streets and to do that. If you watch that video and you listen to the footage from the train, he gets up, it's completely unprovoked. She's sitting there reading a book or on her phone, stabs her as he's walking away, dripping in blood. First of all, nobody on the train said anything. Second of all, he goes, "I got that white bitch." If that were a white man who stabbed a black woman and he said, "I got that black bitch," you would have better believe that would have been everywhere. Every single major media outlet would have been reporting that. And
I disagree.
I disagree. The point
I'm glad to hear you say that a felon and a convicted individual shouldn't be on the streets. I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. A person who was convicted, a
Convicted
9-year-old
felon
girl who was committed of domestic violence.
So,
this one's got nothing to do with
someone
Trump.
has
Don't bring it in
34
here.
felony convictions and convicted of sexually assaulting a woman in rape. Should they be on the streets?
Yeah, she wasn't convicted. He was held liable in a civil
Not
court.
rela-
when he was
not-
in a criminal
not related
conviction,
to
so
this
we don't have to
story,
go back to
but-
that. And these aren't related
Yeah.
in any way, shape, or form because
No,
all
but
those
I'm
charges-
just saying, if that's your belief, should that not be across the board, or is it just
Yes, both
singular?
these
It should
guys
be across
should
the
be
board, but
indicted.
the crime that we're talking about is very different here. So you can't equate one to another. Donald Trump didn't willfully go on a train and stab someone to death for no reason. Okay?
But he sexually assaulted a woman.
That criminal court did not find him guilty for that. He was
Absolutely, they did. They
not a
absolutely did.
criminal court.
They
It was
found
a
him-
civil court who found him liable.
Again, yeah, Kurt, like, Trump is irrelevant here as far as his crimes here, but I
The
do
story.
think the story is relevant in the way that it is exploited by people like
Mhm.
Trump to forward their agenda elsewhere, like these National Guard threats and takeovers of all these, Democratic-run cities. Starting in now, we talked last week about how Trump was targeting Chicago. You guys have heard of a Chicago-style hot dog, right? With the bright green relish, they put the
Yeah.
tomatoes on it, right? Okay, well, we've all heard of Chicago-style hot dog. Have you heard of a Chicago-style taco? This week, Trump backs off his Chicago National Guard threats. Chicago leaders are doing a victory lap after standing up to Trump, who announced he's sending troops to fight crime in Memphis instead. So, because of the unified opposition from community leaders and elected officials in Chicago and throughout the state, the Trump administration backed down from its threats of sending in the National Guard to Chicago. That is the statement from Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. So, if you recall, Trump first floated this idea in August, calling the city a disaster and a hellhole, when in reality, Chicago has seen a nearly 30% reduction in homicide and a 38% reduction in shootings since last year. But if you zoom out, it has been less than a week since Trump posted, Chicago was about to find out why it's called the Department of War, and threatened helicopters and fire and fury on this American city. And by midweek, with pushback from Johnson and Pritzker and others, they decided they were going somewhere more friendly instead, and that place is Memphis. So, calling the city, quote, deeply troubled, Trump suggested the mayor and Tennessee governor were happy with the action, which could include the National Guard and anybody else we need, according to the president. Now, Tennessee's a red state. Mayor Bill Lee is Republican. Mayor Paul Young, a Democrat, said at his Friday afternoon press conference that it was not done at his request, asserting that he learned in the morning that the president and governor are looking to bring federal resources into the city. He said he did not ask for the National Guard and does not think this is the way to drive down crime. He does say, listen, FBI, DEA, ATF, great, fine, bring them in, but I do not want the National Guard in my city. D. Tough line for the governor to walk, or for the mayor to walk there, huh?
Well, I suppose so. There's so many things wrong with this action that it's, we don't have enough time to talk about it, but let me just spell it out. EPSTEIN. This is a distraction so that you will quit talking about Epstein. And there are many cities, this can go on and on and on forever. The National Guard is not to be used in that way. The National Guard is supposed to be run by the state, not by the Fed. I find it interesting that during January 6th, oh my God, I can't send in the National Guard as president. Suddenly, the National Guard can go to all kinds of cities because we're going to help with crime. When in fact, all it's really done is drive down business participation. Ask the restaurants in DC how happy they are with the National Guard walking around the street with guns and tanks. They're not happy at all. This is a misuse of federal dollars, of our tax dollars. I think I heard Chris call it social money. It is a misuse of our social money. it has no rationale except as distraction.
Chris, it's the most expensive, stupidest way to deal with crime, right? I mean, again, if you want to look at it just from a shameless cost savings standpoint, dealing with the causes of crime at a root level is a hell of a lot cheaper than sending in the military.
Yeah.
No?
No, I agree with that, and but I think we can't deny the basic crime statistics of that, how much crime has gone down in DC ever since deploying the National Guard. Even the DC mayor was in support of it after being hesitant to Trump about it at first. So, but I'm not saying that this should be the model for the entire country, right? Trump has the authority to put the National Guard in DC because that's his legal authority. He doesn't have the authority just to spray and send to other states, right? He has to be invited and requested for that to happen. But I think the biggest thing here, and, my sister lives in DC. I have a lot of friends who live in DC who are saying that, it's cleaner. There doesn't seem to be as much crime and stuff going on. But I believe it's more of the deterrent aspect. It is having those military men and women and personnel out there, being just a presence there is deterring a lot of crime. And they're not coming down and they're not putting people at gunpoint and doing things like that. But just their presence, I think, is the biggest deterrent. So not to send the National Guard everywhere else, but how do we help police departments present some kind of deterrent like we are in DC right now without needing the National Guard? That would be my next step for local precincts across the country. This is obviously working in some way, shape, or form as a deterrent. So how can we embody this without needing the National Guard here?
Well, you know what? I'm going to come back on that and say, if I lived in Iran and I stole something, they'd cut off my friggin' hand. That's a wonderful deterrent, but I don't want to live like that.
No, of course not. But
No.
But if you commit a crime in the United States, then you will obviously you would be convicted of it. So that's a law there. It's not a law here. It's not saying
we do not need to normalize having armed people standing in the streets. That's third world crap. I want nothing.
We also need to figure out how to be able to bring down crime at the same time, and it can't be a one-off.
Well, you do that by not passing bills that defund law enforcement, like the big beautiful bill did. There was billions of dollars within that bill that is defunding law enforcement across this country. That is a fact. You don't do it by defunding mental health agencies,
mental health stuff,
and other organizations that are geared and towards people trying to help them in a community where they feel suppressed, where they feel that they have no way out because wages aren't keeping up with inflation and so many other things, where they aren't given a fair chance. That's not how you do it. You don't cut mental health. You don't cut health care. You don't do that. Sending the military in and thinking it's a good thing because there's a result from it is, asinine. That is a third world country, like what Dee said. And if that is people's belief that that's what needs to be done in our country, well, then you're the problem in our country.
Okay. At the end of the day, we are still a country.
You'll see the solutions that should be done. Just like in Chicago, they're investing in mental health and behavioral health. That's what they're doing there. Their numbers are dropping drastically because of the things that Governor Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson are doing. It's proven that if you have somebody in office that's effective and does the right things, it will help people out. But you don't take money away and services and agencies that are designed to help people because you think they're all entitlement programs.
I'm not disagreeing.
I didn't say you particularly, but that's what's happening.
I still can go back on it and say, I'm not disagreeing with that point at all. But at the same time,
I do want to move on.
Laws, we need to be able to follow them.
Yeah, we're running out of time. Football.
Yeah, no, I wanted to mention a couple other things on these lines. Memphis isn't the only place. The Trump administration is also planning on sending National Guard troops to Louisiana, both New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And also this week we got word from the Supreme Court that the roving ICE raids in LA are totally cool, and that they can continue doing this. The justices ruled 6-3 along ideological lines, as you assumed they would, to put a hold on a federal judge's order that reined in what critics called these roving raids. In her dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote, "We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. The government, and now the concurrence, has all but declared that all Latinos, U.S. citizen or not, who work low-wage jobs are fair game to be seized at any time, taken away from work, and held until they provide proof of their legal status to the agent's satisfaction." She wrote, Memphis, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, look forward to this coming to a neighborhood near you. I do want to move on and talk briefly about Trump's tariffs. So we have been following this throughout the year. Throughout much of 2025, the administration's tariffs have defied forecasts that the import duties would drive up inflation, but this week we're beginning to see that that is about over. The consumer price index in August rose at a rate of 2.9% from a year ago, accelerating from the previous month as Trump's tariffs filtered throughout the economy. Heavily imported goods saw some of the steepest price hikes last month, and I'm going to fast forward to talk about some of these products from Brazil. For example, were slapped with a 50% tariff. That means coffee is up 21% over last year. Other things that have gotten more expensive: audio equipment, household furniture, bananas, women's clothing, watches, and motor vehicle parts are all up more than the rate of inflation. Dee, you seeing those tariffs? Your prices going up?
Well, yeah. And, being an old lady, I can probably buy some groceries. I don't know about Chris, might get a little harder on that, but I have children and grandchildren, and they're all struggling trying to pay these prices that are there. And I'm still finding it completely unbelievable that people don't understand something as basic as what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax. It's a tax that's put on an import of some sort. And to assume that the company who is doing the importing is going to continue to take hits to their bottom line is naive at best. They're not. They may take a little bit because they're going to, do one for the GIP or whatever, but that will be passed along. Any rise in cost of goods is passed along to the buyer, and that's all there is. And so you brag on one side about, look at all the money we're putting in the Treasury. Yeah, well, on the other side, it's taking all the money out of our pockets. Let's go back how many stories to what happens in other countries when austerity is imposed. This is a form, tariffs are a form of austerity. And
yes,
we are paying for it. We who can least afford to pay for it are the ones paying for it.
Thank you, Dee. I did want to move on and talk about Jeffrey Epstein this week, because this one won't go away. Got to make sure we get this in there. This probably would have been the story of the week if not for certain other things. But the House Oversight Committee released a bunch of records from Epstein on Monday, including hundreds of pages from this infamous birthday book compiled by his longtime girlfriend and partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, for his 50th birthday. Now, we've heard about the birthday note from Trump, a poem maybe, or a short letter containing a lewd drawing of a young woman and Trump's signature in a strategically placed spot. He denied its existence. Wouldn't you know, there it is. We saw that on Monday. We also got a huge trove of leaked emails from Epstein's Yahoo account from later in the week. I want to say that was on Thursday. More than 18,000 messages from his Yahoo account published by Bloomberg, depicting Maxwell particularly as involved very much in money movement, reputational pushback, and logistics with Epstein. Also, along the Epstein lines, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer sacked the U.S. ambassador over his ties to Epstein. This is Lord Peter Mandelson, fired by 10 Downing Street for calling Jeffrey Epstein his best pal in a handwritten note in this Epstein book. Kurt, just a couple quick thoughts on Epstein this week.
Well, I mean, it's the facts and data are out there, and the reason that they're trying to, the reason they voted 4 hours after Charlie Kirk was assassinated to block the release of the Epstein files is because they know exactly what's in there and who's in there, and they don't want that to leak. And the thing that just pisses me off about this whole thing is Democrats don't care who's in there. I know Bill Clinton's in there. I don't care. They're pedophiles.
Actually, it turns out there was a Bill Clinton note in this birthday book too.
We know he's in there. We know he's in there.
But yeah,
we know he's in there. He was on the flight log too. So, but release him. Why are we protecting pedophiles? Why are we not believing the number of women that have come out and are taking stand on it? Which I'm finally so happy that they have the courage that they're able to do this. And it's asinine. It's another one of those things that's just mind-boggling. We are protecting pedophiles. That's what the GOP is doing. They are protecting pedophiles by not allowing this to be released. And I don't care if they're Democrat, if they're Republican, if they're, independent. It doesn't matter. A pedophile is a pedophile is a pedophile.
Absolutely. Well, a couple more quick stories here before we talk about our one big thing. So this week, Democrats are threatening a shutdown of the government if Republicans don't accept some Democratic healthcare demands. Senate leader Chuck Schumer has weathered backlash from Democrats earlier this year when he voted with Republicans to keep the government open, but now he is willing to risk a shutdown at the end of the month if Republicans don't accede to some Democratic demands. Schumer says he and House Leader Hakeem Jeffries are on the same page in this regard. Schumer says a shutdown wouldn't necessarily worsen an environment in which Trump is already challenging the authority of Congress. It will get worse with or without it because Trump is lawless. Chris, Republicans have been playing the shut down the government game for like 30 years now. Turnabout fair play?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this go back and forth between sides, whoever's in power and wanting to shut down the government and thinking it's a good thing, and then everybody else saying it's a bad thing. But I do agree with Chuck Schumer in that I don't think this would change much of what's already going on. We already have gridlock as it is, but maybe the government shutting down would be a good thing, so we don't have to deal with everybody in it anymore. No, I really don't think that we would see any major drastic change as a result of a government shutdown right now. I would like us to start working together and to, move along. And yeah, the Republicans concede a little bit to Democrats right now. Let's start to work together. Let's start to get that bipartisanship. Come on, that's what we're all been wanting over here. So it's not going to happen. I don't think it would happen. Yeah. I could see a shutdown being very likely, but I really don't think either way it's going to change much.
Yeah, I've always been anti-government shutdown.
We want bipartisans. We want, believe it or not, whatever you think of me, I want to work with Republicans.
Oh, and the same thing with me.
I absolutely want to. What I can't accept is supporting Trump. That's my stopping point. If you support Trump, I really have nothing to talk to you about. And that's where the problem is. Okay. So until we can get past Trump, I think
that's a problem too, because you stop yourself from engaging with somebody who has differing opinions and values than you do, but you can realize that you actually have a lot more in common. And just by even having the conversation and saying, you know what, you like Trump, I like somebody else, that's okay because we were given two options. Let's talk about what we believe in, not what those people are preaching.
If it was anybody else, I would be that way. But it's Trump. It's the guy who created an insurrection against our country, who has done nothing but destroy our democracy and goes against constitutional law and tries to break it almost every single day with his EOs. And I wish Republicans could understand that. If you truly care about our country, quit supporting a guy who's trying to destroy it. I mean, it's not about the difference of opinions or values. I've had that with Republicans my whole life. It's because of Trump.
Yeah, so much of that is.
I don't deny that, but we could talk about any leader on the Democratic side that would have the same feelings for us, like an AOC or a Zohran Mamdani of the world. But I guess what? I would still want to engage with them. I would still want to talk to an AOC.
So you're comparing AOC and Mamdani to Donald Trump?
Yes, I am. Because
oh my God!
Let's talk about extremes on the other side.
Well, those are not extremists, but we're not going to go there right now. I will say, it is important to talk to people you disagree with, but we don't have to talk with like the elected officials who are pushing these narratives. Your average voter is not the people pushing these narratives. They're often victims of these narratives, and we have to keep the lines of communication open to them. Dee, real quick before we talk about our one big thing this week, it's the 40th anniversary of Farm Aid this week. You're going out there to volunteer. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, Willie Nelson and Neil Young and John Mellencamp got together 40 years ago. Actually, it was based on the Live Aid that happened. And Bob Dylan was talking about Live Aid to his buddy Willie. And they said, hey, we should do this. And that's what got it started. They've since added it to their ones that are always there. They've since added Dave Matthews and Margot Price. So there's the 5 of them together. But Farm Aid was put together to raise money to help family farms, not agribusiness. You may hear all the talk about the farm bill this and the farm bill that, and we have to pass the farm bill and all that. But over the course of time, most of the money is going to big corporations like, ADM, et cetera. And it's not filtering, it's not making it to family farmers who are going out of business. Part of the problem with agribusiness is not that they pocket all the money, but it's that the way that they do confined animal feeding operations, the way that they take over entire neighborhoods instead of having a small pig farm and your next door neighbor and you can live with that. They have a gigantic pig farm, and everybody in 3 counties can't breathe anymore because there's too much there. Or they have chickens that they breed to have gigantic breasts, so that's all they are. Their legs break, they can't even stand up. Inhumane. Small family farmers don't do that. Small family farmers pay attention to the soil and regeneration and renewal. And so there is no better, if you like to eat, there is no better charity in this country, in my opinion, than Farm Aid. And I'm more than happy to volunteer. My daughter will be volunteering again this year as well. And we travel wherever. This year it's in Minneapolis. There was a strike. The Teamsters people were striking and our production people would not cross the line. They settled with Governor Walz. They settled the strike Friday night. So the stages are being built and Farm Aid will go on. You can watch it if you want to. Here's my shameless plug. Watch it if you want to. Go to the Farm Aid, I think it's .org. And you can figure out how you can actually watch it on TV and be there with us. I hope you can.
Excellent. Thank you. And I've got some good notes about Farm Aid in the show notes, which I encourage you all to subscribe and get those at projectnextindiana.com or at whosleft.us. All right, guys, deep breath. Are we ready to talk about this thing? All right. So this week, our one big thing, we are going to talk about political violence in the context of Wednesday's assassination of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk. So first of all, let's talk about what happened. Around noon, local time at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, Kirk was holding one of his rallies And at approximately 12:20, as the debate me bro portion of Kirk's event began, one gunshot rang out, which apparently came from the Low C Center, approximately 200 yards away from where Kirk was speaking. Kirk was hit in the neck, probably killing him almost instantly. He was loaded into a private vehicle and taken to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. FBI was on the scene within 15 minutes, and the videos of the gruesome assassination were all over the internet in about that much time as well. And at 2:40 that afternoon, President Donald Trump himself announced that Kirk had passed. So, who was Charlie Kirk? Kirk was one of the highest profile conservative activists and media personalities in the country, and a trusted ally of the president. He was the son of an architect who grew up in an affluent Chicago suburb, briefly attending an Illinois community college before dropping out to devote himself to political activism. He was an avid speaker, touring the country, addressing many Republican events, many of which grew out of the ultra-conservative Tea Party movement. And his social media and his podcast have millions of followers. So, Turning Point USA, he started at age 18 to spread right-wing ideals at liberal-leaning U.S. colleges. He began that organization in 2012 after President Obama's re-election. Its mission at that time was to organize students to, quote, promote the principles of fiscal responsibility, free markets, and limited government. Definitely grew out of the Tea Party movement, had a lot of big right-wing funders from the beginning, has now more than 850 chapters at colleges and universities across the country. Their mission has grown from more of a libertarian free market ideal to more of a Christian nationalist ideal. So before we get in, I want to ask each of you your brief thoughts on Kirk and Turning Point USA, and just, also go ahead and give us your denial of the efficacy of political violence, if you would, please. Denounce that, as we all do. Kurt, go ahead.
I don't know where to begin. I mean, I was not a Charlie Kirk fan whatsoever. He was a bigot. He was a racist. He was a propagandist. He was a liar. He made claims that were so outrageous at times. It was unbelievable. His debating of college students was an actual joke, because he never listened to any questions that actually were given to him. He didn't even wait until the questions were finished, and you could tell he had an answer coming, because he had a system laid out. And if you want to see the truth behind him, or just realize who he was, he loved to debate unsuspected college students who had legitimate questions. But then Charlie would throw something out them like, describe what a woman is, or do men have uterus, or, just crazy shit. Okay. That would throw the students off, because they weren't prepared for that. They thought they were going to get an actual question answered. So this is what happened. And if you want to see him get his lunch handed to him, look at the time that he went to Cambridge and had debates with those students over there. They handed him his lunch because they were prepared for him. So I have no respect for the guy, and the fact that we are trying to memorialize him as some good dude is beyond belief. And the hate that came from the right immediately after this occurred, and some of the comments that were made, and they were made, okay, They were all over the place. Elon Musk, the left is the party of murder. Laura Loomer, most people will be murdered if the left isn't crushed with the power of the state. Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's wife. It's a real treat to see all these liberals condemn political violence now. You have blood on your hands. Jesse Waters, whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us, and what we are going to do about what are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate? Andrew Tate, a human trafficker, civil war. Okay, these are just some of the things that were said, not to mention what Nancy Mason and others on the political scene said. Immediately attacked the right and blamed, or attacked the left and blamed it on us without knowing any facts. The felon got on TV that night and did the same thing without knowing any facts whatsoever. They want to talk about political violence and blame it on us. You want to sit down and talk about political violence? You know, attacks on a certain political ideology? You want to go through the list of people that are on that? I mean, it's unbelievable. You know, but no, I had no respect for Charlie Kirk. And here in my little town of 10,000, we're having a vigil tonight they're having a vigil tonight for him because he's being compared to Martin Luther King.
Yeah, well,
it is absolutely wrong the way that this guy is being glorified. It's wrong, and that's the problem.
Despite all of this stuff, so. and I've got a list a mile long here of heinous things Kirk has said. Despite all of that, he didn't deserve to get shot for it.
Oh no, absolutely not. Absolutely, no one does. No one does.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to, I don't think Charlie Kirk's family is watching this, but express my deepest condolences to his family, his two young children. I mean, they're going to grow up without a father. And you don't wish that on anybody at all. I was in class when this happened. I got sent the video just on my computer. It popped up and I felt sick right when I saw it. It was absolutely gut-wrenching. I couldn't think about anything for the rest of the day. And it's sad, and I didn't want to try to blame anybody from it, right? I didn't want to try to blame the left or the right, because the rhetoric on both sides is extremely divisive and it can cause violence on both sides. But at the end of the day, Charlie Kirk epitomized, debate in the public square. He went to college campuses and he said, if you disagree with me, come to the front of the line. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to have a debate. It may get a little bit heated, just like it has with me and Kurt here, right? But it never went so far as to completely demean somebody or to take away every aspect of who they were. And I didn't agree with Charlie on every single thing that, he said, but I agree with him on some things. And I also believe that he was the voice for young conservatives all across this country who, at a lot of major universities, institutions that are very left-leaning. I'm at one myself. He made people with different perspectives than their professors feel the confidence to be able to speak up and say what they believed, and not be complicit in what their professors are telling them, and to be able to question that authority and say, no, wait, I feel this way, and I should be able to express my viewpoints. He never called for violence against people like that. He wanted people to come together to debate and to truly epitomize what this country was built upon. And to see it just be completely taken away from him like that, and for the bullet casings to say, fascist be gone, which, fascism is all about killing your political opponents. So who was the real fascist there? It's just awful. And if we try to blame one side or the other, and we can get into that, and, some people are to blame for this rhetoric, we're still not going to get anywhere, because political violence, if you justify it in any way, shape, or form, makes no one safe in this country, left, right, or center. And if we justify it in any way, saying, I didn't really like that guy, so he kind of deserved it, or things like that. One of my friends who goes to GW, her professor, she got up and walked out of her class because right after it happened, her professor said, well, we all saw that coming, and started joking about it with students. So how is that acceptable? We have this anonymous thing called Fizz on my campus. It's at a lot of college campuses. And people are calling Charlie Kirk a deadbeat and are saying terrible, heinous things about his wife and what should happen to her. Well, what are we doing here? That it's awful. No matter if you disagree with somebody on every single thing, they don't deserve to die, and they don't deserve justification, your justification for why they should have died. Violence in general is not acceptable. And we should vehemently oppose any type of political violence, left, right, or center.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things there I want to address, but first I want to hear from Dee. Dee, was this guy a warrior for free speech, or was he a warrior for hate speech?
The latter.
Absolutely.
He was monetized for what he was doing, and so in order to make more money, he was I guess brave to go out and do this, but nobody deserves to die for what they believe.
No.
But his ideas deserve to die because his ideas were wrong, and he did say horrible things about people, and he did encourage mayhem. I can show you the clips.
Absolutely.
Did do all of those things. And in the end, it was interesting how it was immediately Democrats who killed him. Of course, there had to be Democrats. And it turns out to be a Groyper that killed him, a 22-year-old Mormon guy with a gun. Come on. There ain't no way that guy's on our side of the aisle. Okay?
He had a transgender girlfriend, so I'm not sure. There's still a lot coming out of it.
No, that's a lie. That's a lie.
He had a transgender partner.
We do not know. We don't know either. We don't know any of these details. We don't know any of these details.
But to say something without having a fact of it is a lie.
But
yes. Well, anyway, but this is again.
But what does that have to do with it? How about the fact that maybe he was more on the side of Nick Fuentes than he was?
So what does that have to do with it too? If you said
because that makes him not a liberal. That makes him not a liberal. Okay, and it's the attacks on liberals that has infuriated so many people in this country. And do you think that this is, you don't think that this kind of thing has happened time and time again when a liberal has been hit and assassinated? You don't think that's happened from the past?
I'm not saying that it hasn't, but I'm
saying, but to single out this incident, like all of a sudden we're glorifying assassinations and people being killed, is absolutely ridiculous.
No, but it's also the culture that has been created. Rutgers University. I wasn't going to bring this up because I wanted to not blame one side. Rutgers University did a study on assassination culture. I can link it in the chat for you. And of the respondents, 55% said it was at least somewhat justified. Of the respondents who identified center left of center, said 55% said it was at least somewhat justified to murder and assassinate Donald Trump. Okay, so the culture that is being created are on the left of leaders saying he should be taken out, punch him in the face. And I'm not saying that the right is completely innocent in all of this, but I'm saying that rhetoric allows people to think this way and say, because he disagrees with me, he doesn't deserve to live.
I'd like
to good. Now, all right, now it's my turn. I brought receipts. Go ahead, Dee.
Thank you. I would like to say that the biggest hypocrisy of all of this is with the flags lowered to half staff and all that stuff, is that I'd like to talk about Melissa and John Hortman, who were murdered, elected officials who were murdered by a right-winger in Minnesota 3 months ago. They had children too. And nothing happened. They didn't even call the governor and say, we're really sorry for what happened to your elected officials. That is political violence. And
Republican Senator Mike Lee thought it was hilarious.
No vigils, no nothing.
Exactly.
So let's talk about, I want to talk about Kirk and hate speech for a second, because I want to, a lot of the criticism from the left, and a lot of, I think, what the left is pointing out in the wake of this assassination isn't that he deserved it, it's that he cultivated this environment. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of things Charlie Kirk said about people, about black folks. Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, oh, I hope he's qualified. Black women, they're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to be taken somewhat seriously. We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. The death penalty should be public, should be quick, should be televised. And I think at a certain age, it's an initiation. At what age should you start to see public executions? It says the Democrat Party supports everything that God hates. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage. Here's one. You might want to crack open that Bible of yours. It says in Leviticus 18, thou shalt lay with another man, shall be stoned to death. George Floyd, this guy was a scumbag. He deserved to die. The Great Replacement Theory. It's a reality. Just this year, 3.6 million foreigners will invade America. Guns. Here's this one. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment. He says, Jewish donors have been the number one funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews, and now it's coming for Jews. Martin Luther King was awful. He's not a good person. He said one good thing he actually didn't believe. Muslims plan to conquer Europe by demographic replacement. Palestine doesn't exist, and transgender people are an abomination of God. The man cultivated a culture of dehumanization that says these other people are not fully human and don't deserve to live. So now, I don't think anybody on the left, at least like prominent electeds or anybody, are saying he deserved this. Are you finding some people online who say, yeah, he had it coming? Yeah, certainly. But, thoughts and prayers. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, John Hoffman, one of these guys who was, shot in Minnesota earlier this summer, Gabby Giffords, Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, AOC. All of these people are out here saying political violence is unacceptable. Yet,
Scott, you're gonna love that I'm saying this, but I think Bernie Sanders had the best response to this. What happened here?
I actually don't have Bernie's response in here. What did he say?
Oh, it's a very similar, but like if you go on his Twitter, Instagram, it's like a long drawn out, but it's very similar to what I said before. And it wasn't bringing in any of the, of what Charlie Kirk thought. Right. And I think that can kind of muddle the debate around political violence right now, because we can have a separate conversation on Charlie Kirk's values and beliefs. Right. But not try to conflate it with political violence and almost create that avenue of a justification for political violence, right? I don't think we should do that. But
I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think he's justifying political violence by
quoting
quoting
so
what
either,
Charlie Kirk said.
Conflating the issues and talking about them in the same segment could allow that pathway for justification. And that's just my own
That's not what he's doing.
Right.
That's not what we're doing.
What it could lead to for different
we're trying to expose who the guy was, and that he shouldn't be memorialized and compared to Martin Luther King and flags flown at half staff. Now you put on a talking point about Rutgers University, and 55% of the students said that Trump should be assassinated.
It was a study conducted by Rutgers University.
I'm just saying, you said 55%. Okay, 55%. Okay, and you've got a problem with that. Do you have a problem with what Kevin Roberts said? That we're in the second phase of the American Revolution and it will remain bloodless as long as the left allows it to? What are your thoughts about that? Is that not political violence?
Once again, it isn't one or the other. It's not like, here's an issue.
I'm just saying, you've got a talking point. We do too. You've got a talking point and want to point out a study done, and 55% of the people, and maybe not you, but conservatives act like this is a right-wing thing or a left-wing thing. This is not. The violence from the right has been decades in the making. We have been listening to it for years. And things like what Kevin Roberts and so many others get ignored by all of you. And then when a study comes out that 55% of the people think Trump should be assassinated, you have a hissy fit over it and got to bring it up.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But you ignore everything else.
Of it, because now you're having the hissy fit over the fact
You're damn right. You're damn right. Because again, this all comes down to Donald Trump.
What you said, and
this all comes down to Donald Trump. And that is why we will never get anywhere, which I want to. We have to have bipartisan government here. But until Donald Trump is out of the picture, we will not get there.
Period. Not the root cause of this problem. He is a symptom of the right-wing violent streak that has been in place this whole time.
It's not a right-wing violent streak. The left way, you can't. Once again, we can't play sides on
this. But Chris, listen. Come on, man. This assassination, the right is calling for blood before they.
Blood.
You're not calling for Democrat leaders to be killed like Charlie Kirk was.
Absolutely.
There's not mobs and riots in the streets like after George Floyd. There's vigils. There's prayer. Okay.
Oh my God! What about January 6th, Chris?
I'm not providing any justification for January 6th, but it was different.
You just said there's no violence. Bullshit.
We're talking about a martyr here. George Floyd was a martyr.
We are not talking about a martyr. We are talking about a racist, misogynistic prick.
Handled very differently.
Kurt, we are talking about a martyr.
He is a martyr.
We don't determine who their martyr gets to be. Okay.
That's true.
Immediately after this thing happened, I caught shit online because I said right here, like, I don't cry for Charlie Kirk. He cultivated this environment. I do not weep for him. I am sad for his kids that they were going to have to grow up without their father. I do not weep for Charlie Kirk or his political allies. What I worry about more than anything is that he is a martyr and that he is the American far right's new Horst Wessel. Do y'all know who Horst Wessel is?
Architecture of all this violence stuff. Charlie's just a brick in the architecture that has been being built since 2015, 2016 or so. With the talk of
militia movement, the 70s, Camp of the Saints, to keep going. Yeah,
what's going on? It's just a brick. It's part of it. But unfortunately, I think it's been built up high enough now, if you can do that visualization with me, that now we're getting to where it's coming to an apex and something's going to happen bad. This may be the start of that sort of thing. And this is not acceptable in our country. It's not acceptable in any party. It is not acceptable to go around killing people because you don't like them. And I don't care if it was somebody from the far left, and I don't care if it was somebody, which it appears to be, farther right than he was.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You don't.
Yes, it is, Chris. The evidence is coming out.
The shooter wasn't far right.
That is not true. That's not true. It is coming out that he was.
No, and that is
exactly. There's no evidence
of which side we don't know, and the right is out here calling for blood when we don't know. They wanted so bad for it to be like a transgender person or a leftist because they're just begging to go to war. They want our blood.
You want it to be some big gun rights activist at the same time.
It's football time, guys.
It sounds like it is football time.
It is. Listen, this is not the closing chapter here. This is the opening chapter. I worry about in an era of even more political violence. Please, I ask we all keep our head. I want to hear the Kaya Rychicks and Andrew Tates and Jesse Waters of the world saying the things that the Obamas and Schumers and AOCs of the world were saying this week and not what they were saying. Let me give you all a chance to say goodbye. Maybe give yourself a shameless plug on the way out the door here. Kurt, where can the people find you?
Well, first off, thank you for having this conversation. Chris, regardless of how I come off to you, I respect your points of view. And I would love to work across the aisle with you, but I'm dead serious, bud. Until Trump's out of the picture, I don't see how that can be done. Okay. And that's how we truly feel. So my name is Who's Your Blue on social media. I've just started a podcast called Something to Say with Hoosier Blue. Find me there. I'm obviously a left socialist progressive liberal that does not like Donald Trump. And that's who I am. But that does not mean that I do not like everyone on the right. I want to work. We have to have a bipartisan government if this democracy is going to survive. Dictators and fascism will not allow us to grow. It will destroy our democracy. So thanks, Scott, for having me. I'm sure it's probably going to be another 6 months before you invite me back, but hey, that's
hey, I invite you every week, Kurt. The schedule works the way it works sometimes. Thank you very much, Chris. I really do want to thank you for being here today, especially. I asked you to be here specifically to make sure we had a conservative voice in here, and you have held your own very well. Where can the folks find you?
I'm private on most of my social media accounts, which I think is a good thing. But Christopher Maichin, you can find me on LinkedIn too. If anybody wants a Republican to come on their podcast, I'm always open to it because I would rather to talk to people with different viewpoints than the ones with the same. So I can develop my own ideology at the same time. And Kurt, everything you said, right back at you. Even after this intense debate, I'd still love to grab a beer and watch the football games with you this Sunday. So, this is what we should be doing. This is the kind of conversation we should be having. They can get heated, but at the end of the day, we can walk away and say, we're both Americans. Absolutely. We're both human beings. Let's move on together.
Absolutely. I have respect for you. And I don't mind the Jets. If you were a Patriots fan, that might have been a bit different.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go on a podcast with the Patriots fan either. But,
yeah, these are the important things. These are Dee, how about you? Where can the folks find you?
I love spirited discussion, always. That's true.
Yes.
I am a dyed-in-the-wool yellow dog Democrat, and that is the way I'm always going to be. I was raised by Depression babies and World War II veterans, and if my father was alive today, he would be absolutely apoplectic about the things that are going on. I've got to tell you. So, having fought fascism, he often said, "This is why I went to war." So I think that we need to keep the fascists away from the doorstep and then duke it out as best we can.
And Dee has a dog named Bill.
Yes. It's gonna be a new podcast on Project Next.
A dog named Bill.
I consider myself lucky to have known both Dee's dad and Bill. So in the meantime, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Those of you who have joined us live and been in the comments, I appreciate you so much. And for all you listening there on podcast form, I appreciate you too. Thanks for downloading us. Be sure to subscribe to Project Next and subscribe to Who's Left online. But until next week, my name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and this has been Who's Left this week. Love each other, Indiana.
Thank you.
Thank you.